All right, well, thank you for coming to my presentation. I'm going to talk about Desperado Duke, my comic, and this is the making of a fantasy western. So we'll start out with this quote from one of the characters in my comics. Heroes are born out of chaos. In times of peace, people have no need for such things. It's only when darkness takes root in the heart of men that heroes are needed to keep the balance. And I feel like, out of all the narrative that I wrote, this sums up the biggest portion of my comic. This is really a tale of, coming from chaos and somebody coming and applying some order on that chaos. And the person that's going to do that is Desperado Duke. And who he is? Well, he's kind of an anti-hero, but he's also the protagonist of my comics. He's a product of chaos, but he's also the embodiment of transcendence in my story. It's really this tale of this internal struggle and external struggle of this character. He basically goes on an internal journey much similar to, you could say, related to Buddha or even Muhammad. Both of those religious figures have gone on inward quests to find peace. Come on in. But, it's also kind of this journey into hell, or the 7 layers of hell, just like in Dante's Inferno, before he gets to paradise. So, who he is, and this is what I did with all of my characters. I created a biography and a physical description for them, not only to help me while I'm writing to try and maintain their character, but because I'm working with an artist who's all the way in California, and he can't read my mind, so I needed to kind of give him a base description of everything. So my biography for Duke is the son of a sheriff and nurse who are killed by bandits in Aguala Springs. He's abducted by the same bandits that raided his town and raised into being a desperado, or bandit general. Duke has an epiphany when he's left to die out in Crater Canyon and found by a shaman. He is influenced to turn away from his darkness and embrace the light. Duke becomes a protector of the people and vows never to kill again. And I put a question mark there because this was something I was going to play with as I kept writing, and I wasn't sure, but it was something I felt like I had to write and remember so I could keep coming back to that idea. Duke struggles to keep his inner demons in check, and they sometimes cause conflict in his life. Duke decides he must bring his former friends, the other desperados, to justice. It is a quest to cleanse not only Crater Canyon, that's this place where Aguala Springs is, but also Duke's soul. And my physical description of him is he's roughly 6 feet tall and around 200 pounds. As an adult, Duke has medium-length black hair and short-cropped, scruffy beard. He wears a dark green bandana around his neck that he can use as a partial dust mask. He has a black cowboy hat with a pair of goggles on top of the brim. He usually wears a full-length brown duster jacket with a long-sleeve black undershirt and pants, black boots. He carries 2 pistols in his armpit holsters and has a large hunting knife attached to his belt. He has a light scar running diagonally across his face. And one of the things that I learned while doing this project is that you need to be as descriptive as possible. And that's something that I've been refining and working on with more feedback I get. But, if I can't describe it, I can't expect my artist to draw it. So if you guys are interested in creating comics, whenever you're creating characters, it's good to have a background story and then a good description so that when you're referencing them in your story, your artist doesn't just have to come up with his own interpretation and kind of skewer your image. So the quest he's on, basically this quote kind of sums up the quest. It's not, Maynard James Keenan is an artist. He sings in the band Tool. But I felt like these lyrics summed up my idea better than anything I had quite written. So I'm just going to say, you've left me with no choice but to go inside and rebuild what's broken. Too much, too far, too late to lie down now. I must arm myself to fight you. I'm making weapons out of my imperfections. It's all I have left. There's no other choice. So basically, how that relates to what I'm trying to do is, this is a story about a guy who is abducted and raised by these bad guys. He learns how to, rob and, mug people and survive in the wild and, all these kind of harsh things. And and then they leave him to die, and he has to come back, and he has to use these flaws, these imperfections, turn them into weapons, and take them and, you know, lead this crusade to not only change these flaws within himself, but also, you know, stop the violence and oppression that's going on in this place, Crater Canyon. So this quest, it all starts out, and this is a rough sketch image. It's going to be digitized, but this is Aguala Springs Burning, and this is basically where it all starts. This is a quest about revenge, but it's also a quest about redemption, and it's really the line between those two that we're going to walk on this journey, you know, trying to keep from becoming the monsters that you're fighting. It's also an internal and an external journey. You know, there's these the seven desperados, which each have a character flaw, and Duke is one of them. He gets left behind, and then he comes back to take these guys out, and in taking out them, each character flaw that these characters represent is also a flaw within Duke, and it's also a flaw within myself that I saw and embodied in these characters. And the easiest way to put it is basically the 7 deadly sins, but without it being that strict into what the 7 deadly sins are. They're kind of, like I said, flaws that I saw within myself: greed, lust, anger, ego, pride, things like that. So my goal on this quest is to not just be like, okay, you left me out here to die, I'm going to come back and I'm going to kick your ass, you know. It's like, no, it's about learning who you want to be and then becoming that person, and then that kind of reflects in the outer world as well. And my plan for doing all this, well, I can sum it up kind of by this quote from one of the characters in my novels, who's a narrator. Discipline allowed him to focus, and his versatility allowed man to imitate the art of his creators. Well, my co-conspirator or co-creator here is Derek Everett. He used to go to Dakota State University last year, graduated with an animation degree, and now he's out in California. But right now he's working on the illustrations. He's my creative assistant, and he's also a co-producer, doing all the image work for me. Together, using tools like Microsoft Word, pens and paper, Skype, email, Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, Adobe InDesign, and our imagination, we've been putting together this 14-page prequel comic. And this is the basic map of how we kind of communicate other than Skype. I create a basic outline, and I kind of highlighted things for you guys. Anything that's highlighted in red isn't really normally in there, but I go by a basic P6 for my page numbers, so this would mean this is the 6th page of the comic. Now on each page there are different images, as we can see here, and here's another one. This page consists of 3 images, but this is the image number, and then this is the image layout on the page. So the top third of the page, and if we go back to the last slide, this is page 6. So this is the top third of the page that I'm talking about, and kind of divided up into panels that way. But and then, so I say the top third of the page, I try and be as descriptive as possible. And then I go into the actual image description over here. Something that I recently learned, I was trying to get this impression of dream vision edges on a comic, and if you've read comics, you know sometimes that they'll have like maybe white edges and the borders will be kind of wispy or not full. And that's kind of what I wanted to convey. And you know, I was like, okay, dream vision edges. Well, I'm going to send that to Derek and have him interpret that. But what I found out is actually from my mom. I was like, hey Mom, you want to read this? And she's like, sure, I'll read it. And she's like, dream vision edges, is that a character? I was like, no. So I figured I actually need to add that back into this top third of the page and then talk about the border in there. It's really good, and that's part of the descriptive process. You want to be descriptive, but you kind of need to section it out, especially if you're not doing all the art yourself. I mean, if you have the ability to do art and draw, then you can go ahead and just create your image how you see it. But when you're working with someone, it's really key to try and be as descriptive as possible. But then we go down here. After the images on each page, there's always text. So then I do text identifiers, and this is text 1. This is just a basic, because it's going to say 10 years ago, so it's not anybody talking. It's not narration or anything. It's just on the page to signify 10 years. Then I got the dialogue text, which is this stuff. But if it's a narrator talking, I'll narrator and then narrator 1 text. But sometimes, if it's Duke talking, this will say Duke 1. And let's say I have another character named Draymond, and if he's also talking, it'll be Draymond 1 will be his first one. But then if Duke talks again further down on the page, you'll go Duke 2. Just like narration 1, narration 2. So these each represent either a narration bubble or a dialogue bubble. And one thing I haven't really went into detail yet, because I'm working on getting all the images put into InDesign to the layout and then add the text over, is that the difference between a narration box and a dialogue box, because this also factors into how people read the comic when you want to switch between what's thought and what's actually dialogue. Well, if you didn't know, narration and thought is usually represented in a square box, and then sometimes they'll have that box shaded or color-coded to a certain character. And dialogue itself is usually a bubble text, not square, and it's normally coming out of the character's mouth instead of offset in the corner. And that's something I'm working on developing and refining as I continue to develop my map or outline of the story. But then the process using that is, first, what I've been doing is I go in and I lay out the pages. So as we see in this image here, we have 3 panels. So first thing I'll do is, okay, so we're going to do 3 panels. I'll do image 1, top third of the page, image 2, second third of the page, image 3, bottom third of the page. And then from there, I'll go on to describe the images, create the vision that I see. So for this scene up here on the top of this is a bar fight. So I go in and I describe, okay, I want Duke and this other guy, Dirge, in this bar here. Dirge has got this guy up by his neck. Duke's holding a guy as a shield, using a beer bottle. The whole bar is going to jump in on him. And I try and describe that as completely as possible to Derek so he knows what I'm talking about. And then I send that off to him. And then I'm going in and I go back and I start developing the narrative that I had in mind in the dialogue for each image. So there's no text bubbles on these right now because they'll be added in later, but I look at the pictures, I think, what did I want to say? When I thought of this image, when I thought of this layout, what was the story I was trying to tell? I go in and add that, and then me and Derek will meet on Skype, and we'll sit down. He has my outline, I email it to him, and then sometimes he'll come to me with images like this, and we'll sit down and we'll talk about, okay, well, I like what you did there, or, can you be more descriptive here? What doesn't work, what does work, and then after our Skype meeting, we'll go back, try and adjust things, and then we'll come back again and meet and see a more finished image of everything. But then using that process, I've learned that adjustments have to be made, and the biggest things that I learned are be descriptive, and that's the biggest thing. That's probably the biggest thing with writing too in general. Even if you're not writing comic books, you have to be descriptive, otherwise people can't see what you're talking about. And that's been the biggest work in progress for me, is learning to become a more descriptive writer in my image descriptions, and that'll carry over to if I want to write novels. Well, if I want to describe this room in a paragraph, well, if I really want to capture the feel of it, I have to be super descriptive. I also learned to be flexible. I have this idea in mind of where I want to go and kind of what I want to do, but the feedback I get from people, I have to be able to adjust to that, change things. I can't, if you become too structured, I think, you're bound to break and have this writer's block or, hit a wall. So be flexible, but have a goal in mind. Also, get feedback from everybody possible, because there are things that I just assume or take for granted at times that, people know what I'm doing, or this is the image in my head, this is how I want it. Well, and if I only say like a couple sentences about it, well, only about 25% of that actually translates to what somebody else can pick up on. And then always refine and adapt. Take it in layers. What I originally did with my outline is I had basic descriptions of sections, how I wanted to do. I did 3-page sections. These 3 pages were going to be, Duke training with the Desperados. These 3 pages are this train robbery scene. So I went through and I did that for my whole story. And then from there I kept building and building, added this layer, got the images down, added the text. I've gone back and just refined all that. And continuing to just go back and refine everything is the best possible process you can do, because you go out there and lay something down your first time, you may think it's great, but then once you get some feedback, it's like, no, I got to shave some more off or add some here or there. But the thing about this image here, some of the things I want to describe that I learned, Derek, he showed me this image, and I was like, okay, I like a lot of what's going on here, but there's some differences in my description from what you ended up drawing. And if you can see this up here, it's supposed to be a horse. We're underneath a horse, and I think it's a really awkward view of a horse. We got like a horse crotch shot here. And I was envisioning it going sideways, horizontal, almost like a silhouette of horse hooves running to the left of the page. But that got misconstrued in my description, and so I had to go back and talk to him. No, I wanted it a different way. I think it was awkward. He's like, oh, okay, I get it now. And then, so he made some notes on here. He said, you can't really see it, but it said side horses, and he's got the action text in here that I wanted. And then he left a little mark for himself to go back and edit. And then down here, I really wanted this guy kind of getting blown away. Super violent in a sense, but I wanted him kind of getting shot in the head and falling backwards. Well, he has him kind of slumped over like he got shot in the gut, and we were kind of working through discussing that. And he made a little note down here. You can kind of see that this is actually a little dude. You can see the gun in his hand. His head is falling back like this, and he made that note. But none of that would have been possible had we not sat down and Skyped and hashed out what I envisioned and what he was able to interpret from that. So be prepared to make adjustments. For the future of my project, I just put this quote in here because I felt like it's kind of going to imitate what I'm doing. For the men who imitate the gods must reap the seeds they have sown. So in imitating the gods and creating a world here, I either need to reap the benefits or watch myself go down in flames, which I hope won't happen. But in the future, we're looking for a 14-page prequel to the Desperado Duke saga in ebook format on Amazon by January 1st. I'm going to have some print copies made. I don't know. If I get enough of them made, I might see if the bookstore won't sell a couple of them, but I figure everybody could get them on Amazon if they really wanted to read it. It's only going to be $1 or so, $1 or $2. But yeah, hopefully I have that all done by, January 1st we should have the ebook done. Print copies might be a little different. I don't know if the school's open over the break to get them printed. But I want to thank you for coming, but I'd really like to entertain questions if you guys have questions and open it up for discussion about my process. If you guys want to learn what's troubled me, if you guys have questions about creating your own things, I'll definitely entertain them. Yeah, so I have the end of the month. Right now I have the narrative created, the images laid out. Derek, he has those sketches done. He's got to do a few more sketches, but he's also going online right now using Illustrator, copying over everything, digitizing it, and then once he starts sending me those, as soon as he gets one page done, he's going to send it to me, and then I'm going to put it on InDesign and start putting the text bubbles in. So we have a month worth of crunch time here to get it put out. But yeah, January 1st, hopefully. Andrew?
Could you go back a few slides to the, yeah, that one. I remember you'd brought sort of your script to that writers group once, and I recognized this scene from that. But I also feel like, I don't know, is there dialogue that's supposed to be in there yet that isn't in there?
Yeah, right now he kind of just did some action text. There's a whole narrative that runs through this as well as dialogue. So I split, there's kind of two stories going on at the same time. It's the same story, but I have this narrative kind of talking around this background stuff, and then I have actual dialogue. Like you'll see, like, I guess this is just an example of this lady screaming, or baby screaming in a tub. So you kind of have text like that, background text. Another great one, this bar fight scene. I have a narration running along, kind of telling this backstory, talking about kind of this mythology, this creation myth that I'm creating in the narrative. But then we'll also see character dialogue, like Duke will be, saying something, he's got holding that there, holding a bottle, like, come at me.
What I meant to ask was, it seems a bit more compressed than I remember sort of you describing. Have you been sort of paring back on cutting things, and if so, why the decision to cut what you've cut?
Well, I figured first that first stuff I brought, I had big paragraphs. I had this, grand sweeping idea of what I wanted to say, and then, I realized I got 14 pages to say it in. I have to be efficient, so I just went in there and I started cutting out all this extra stuff to try and make my sentences as concise would be the word. There was another word I was thinking of, but concise as possible, to be as efficient and concise as possible to get my message across. So I went back, I cut everything down, and I started dividing up what I was doing in those big paragraphs into this narrative and then this dialogue in the text to kind of, because what I was saying in those big things, a lot of it could be portrayed as, trying to describe a character. Well, how I want to describe my characters is how you see them, how Derek interprets them on the page, but then also through their dialogue, and not just me saying stuff like that. So I kind of divided some of that up, created this other narrative, and then added dialogue to give the characters personality. But yeah, if you want to go, that first couple pages I showed you, this is my basic outline. This is how I work right now, going through things. I think it's page. I decided halfway through it that I was gonna kind of mess with the narrative. I was gonna put the beginning at the end and foreshadow some things. So what I had originally as those first pages is now, I think, page 3. Yeah, right here. Page 3. What you've seen of my page 3, it had this, see, I have narrative 3 going down. Pared that all the way back. This I cut down, kind of says, I'll read some of it. Heroes are born out of chaos. That's that first quote I used to. In times of peace, people have no need for such things. It's only when darkness takes root in the hearts of men that heroes are needed to keep the balance. And then, not all heroes start out from humble beginnings, though. Some heroes are wrought from darker places. Some are ripped from the warmth of their mother's arms. And then it transitions into that. And I felt, what I had before was we were going to have this big, long text blocks on the side of the page, and now I have 3 concise ones that move down the page, I feel like. So I don't know if that answers your question, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Dr. Nelson?
Do you have any pages that are sort of finished?
I do, because right now I'm getting the digital images put into InDesign and putting that on there. The closest I have is this, and then the sketch images. So I'm kind of waiting on Derek to keep sending me the other ones so I can put them in InDesign and put the text boxes on them. Andy.
Are there any genre-specific tools or tools that are used primarily for making comics that you've had to teach yourself how to use or experience that you didn't know before?
Well, one thing that I did on kind of learning, I kind of had an idea of how I could create an outline, but this basic outline that I'm following right now is kind of, I was imitating what Scott Snyder, the writer of the new Batman, does. And at the end of some Batman comics, or even a lot of comics in general, you go to the back of it and you'll see that artists have artist sketchings of the characters, but then they also sometimes lay out their outline and how they do it. And this process that I did here is basically me taking what Scott Snyder was doing and taking that and putting it into my own comic. He's a little bit the relationship that he has working with his artist is on a different level, and I think they also work in person a little more. So he can be a little bit, they almost can read each other's minds in a way. He can write something down like, I want it this way, I know how you draw this way, so, do that thing you do and create this. But with me, I took the basic skeleton of what he was trying to do. I took that, and I've been trying to do my best to develop this working relationship with Derek so we can kind of start reading each other's minds on how to efficiently say what we're trying to say. And that's really the only genre-specific tool I really picked up. I looked at how a couple other comic book artists were outlining their stuff, but that's about as far as I went into it so far.
It sounds like you have a really strong image of what you want to see in each of those frames, how each page should look, and how many frames are going to be on there, and that kind of thing. Did you ever try actually drawing them?
Yeah, and that's something that's another one of those things, adapt and be flexible, and refining. After about getting 6 pages done, I started, like, okay, when we came to some of those problems where I was like, okay, this is what I want, and then I got the horse crouch shot, infamous, but I started drawing it out. I would lay out the panels, and then I would do my, like, caveman painting of what I wanted for Derek, just so he had the basic idea of kind of it was more about the perspective I was looking at things, because he was understanding kind of what I wanted, the images that way, like what the character should look like and what they're doing, but just from the perspective I was looking at it, like I want it from the side, or it's like he needs to be falling back, or it should be from over this guy's shoulder. That I really started sketching my own out, and yeah, that helped out a lot here basically at the end. It took a little more time for me to do now, but it was definitely worth it because images started coming together a lot faster. They were a lot tighter.
Kind of following up on what Andy was asking, because some of the students who are here are working on final projects for their comic book class, I wondered if you might talk about sort of your inspirations and influences for the art, or the narrative, or just anything that you felt inspired by as you were putting all these ideas together.
All right. Yeah. Before I get really deep in that, one thing I should mention is this is a Western, so I had to kind of take things from. I wanted it to be a fantasy Western. Originally, I had this idea it was going to be this weird Western was what I was calling it, and then it almost went like steampunk idea Western, and I really settled on fantasy Western is more appropriate. And when I say fantasy, it's because like some of the there's magic in it, and then there's also like hybrid animal creations that I created, like this lizard-like thing up here that roams the desert, things like that. But in keeping in tone with this Western idea, I had to look at like, okay, what are some traditional things you'd see in a Western or expect from a Western town. So I'm like, okay, well, I want to have a train robbery. I want to have a bar fight in a saloon. I need, I guess people running through towns, bandits. So I was looking at, some of these, I guess, watching a few old Western movies, and then just kind of, I've been reading a couple of books. There's this book called The Iron Council. It's a weird fiction, but it's kind of this Western thing. They're playing on the railroad being built and people going out there. So I drew a lot of inspiration from that and trying to put that into here. But in general, my biggest inspiration for a lot of this, comes from a lot of mythology. To be honest, mythology and religion. I don't know if you want to get into that conversation of, they're both kind of similar things. They're trying to teach lessons. But I took a lot from creation myths. I wanted my story to start out in chaos, and that's why I originally had it starting with this town burning down. But like the Egyptian creation myth, I know they say everything came out of water, but they said chaos was first. In Greek mythology, chaos came first. With the universe, there was nothing, and then there was chaos. So I took those ideas, like, okay, so everything's created out of this chaos. So I wanted to create my hero in a moment of chaos. So I drew inspiration from those. But then I also keep going back to, the idea of Dante's Inferno and him going through hell. And, I have these 7 desperados my character is going to overcome. Eventually, this is a prequel comic, but in my undergrad project, there'll be 7 books. Each one he's overcoming a different flaw, but it's like each one's a different layer of hell. Each one he has to learn to overcome it in himself before he can overcome the guy, his opponent externally. So I looked at it that way. And then, also, like, there's this betrayal moment in my comic, and that's, the image that comes to my head is like the Last Supper and Jesus, because I have an image of them all standing around a table, they're plotting, we're going to do this train robbery, and it's at the end of that train robbery they betray him. So it's kind of like this, I took these archetype images that are out there, because I know it's not just the Last Supper is the only betrayal scene. I mean, I guess, Caesar was betrayed. I took these themes that are already in literature and applied them to a lot of what I wanted to do, because they do exist. And I mean, as a person, a lot of my influence, like I said, these characters, I try to embody them with my own flaws, and that makes it really relatable. But when you find out that, I can guarantee that all of you have been related to being betrayed in some way or other. It's these very personal things that just happen to also be in myth and religion, because they're part of the human conflict. So, I mean, I take a lot of your inspiration from the stories you like to read. I love mythology, and, I'm not the biggest Western fan, but I kind of like the idea of the genre, and just like, cowboys running around, horses, Wild West, everybody's rough and tough. I like that idea, but, you really got to draw inspiration from yourself, and that's what makes it, that's what really makes it, that's how I was able to even get this far, and it was like, whoa, okay, what are things going on in my life, what are things that I can relate to, or even can't relate to, or what do I want to become, and how do I portray that through this art. So, I mean, your biggest inspiration should be the literature you love, what are you passionate about in life, and what are your experiences, and then just try and be as real as you can in bringing that to the page, because it's hard to talk, it's hard to write about stuff that you've never experienced or don't know about, so you really have to put a little bit of yourself into the project to be inspired.
Other questions?
Andrew?
Are the final sketches or the final product visually going to look sort of like these sketches, or will there be color, for example?
There'll be color. There'll be more detail. These are basically because what he does is he takes he scanned them, and as you can see, this is like on a piece of paper that he scanned and sent to me. He takes that, scans that in, puts it in as a background, so he can kind of trace over it to get the basic design, and it goes a lot faster. But then go into it, add more detail, because basically, like right here, we see it's like, okay, well, there's a chalkboard, podium, desks, and teacher and stuff's going on, but there needs to be more detail in the background. I mean, I'm not trying to go for, I want it to be simple, but we're not, I don't know if, like, a good example, have any of you ever seen the cartoon show Samurai Jack? Maybe? They use really simple animation in that, it's like, really simple movements, like things will slide, or just, simple. It's a really minimalistic style, and I want to kind of toe the line of minimalism, but I also want enough detail in it where it's like, we're not looking at a lot of white space or black colored in space saying that this is wall. I need to, one of the things I was talking to Derek about is we need to give like this cabin, or we can see this cabin on the outside. Well, there's images on the inside of it, and he's got like the wooden walls on it. But like, we need to hang some pictures up. We need to have like, address it. We need to have things to give it character and make it feel, because I guess 50% of the job is me writing and describing it, and then 50% of it is like, well, actually, when you get the comic, my narrative's important and my setting up of it, but what really sells a comic is good, solid imagery, because that tells half the story. That's why it's not all text, because you have to be able to take things out from the images that they don't explicitly state. I know in like use Batman again for an example or something, and there's been Batman Hush, I want to say, is a comic book, and then Catwoman's in it, but in the background, Batman will be up on this building, but then if you look really closely in the background, you can see like Catwoman hiding in the shadows, like on this building in the background, and yeah, you may not notice that, but it's there for a reason. It's part of the story, and then it's kind of adds to, okay, so she's tailing Batman, type of thing, and you got to interpret that yourself. So, and that goes back to me being descriptive and working with Derek. But yeah, this is kind of what they'll look like, but with a layer of detail and color to them, and also narrative. Any more questions?
Is there a maximum of how many frames you can get on a page? Do you like to stay under a certain number so each image has enough room to speak for itself?
I kind of, I should probably look into that a little more, what I guess experts say. Me, I like to keep it 7 at the most. Is the most. I think 7's the most I've ever done on a page. As you see, there's 7 here, and I think this is a pretty efficient use of 7 panels. One page that I do takes pretty much straight down here is one, so we have this big long image on the side, and then I have 6 of these going down, so they're about half, and there's 6 of them. And I was thinking, it's like, I was thinking about when I'm writing the narrative for that too. It's like I got these images, and you can put a good amount of detail and express that in there. But then I'm also like, well, now I have this much space. I can't write a big block of text to put in there. So, I don't want to add too many kind of reference comics that I've been reading, kind of how they lay out. I've seen it done where there's actually 9, where they take this 3 and then they add another 3 in there. And that's really the most I've ever seen on anything. I tried to keep it pretty simple. Like I said, there's this page. You see a couple pages like this, and then there's the one page that's really long with the 6. And that was pretty much the most creative I got with it. And that was also like, okay, now we might run into some smushed issues. But I've been trying to be conscious of it, and I'd say I try and keep it 7 and under, if not less. If I had more pages, like when I do my undergrad project, I plan on making them about 20 pages each, but I also plan on having a lot more full-page panels, maybe even some 2-page spreads, and I didn't really do that in this, because I was going 14 pages, and if you have a 2-page spread, well then, kind of cutting out the story you can tell. So, no, I don't know for sure. Something that I should probably look up, and that's good feedback to hear. But yeah, I try and keep it around 7. But other than that, if there's no more questions, I thank you guys for coming and listening to me. I hope you guys have a good day. And if you have any more questions that you didn't want to ask here, you can always email me. I'll probably send this to Dr. Barry so you can put it in the comics books class. You guys can look over it. I'm always willing to discuss and see what happens. So thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming. for those of you who are here from comics. So working week this week for the